"He's not coming," my echoed in the cavernous, silent church, each one a hammer blow to my heart. "He's not coming." My own voice sounded alien, a hollow whisper swallowed by the vaulted ceilings and the weight of 100 pitying stares. The scent of white roses, once a promise of new beginnings, now choked me with the sweet perfume of decay. My trembling fingers tightened on the satin of my wedding dress, the pristine white a cruel mockery of the sullied, shattered thing I had become. Tears blurred the image of the empty altar, the space where Marcus was supposed to be, where our forever was meant to start. Instead, there was just nothing, a void that mirrored the one ripping through my chest. Alone, exposed, and utterly broken, I felt a shadow fall over me, a chilling presence that cut through the haze of my grief. A hand, large and impossibly warm, gently enclosed mine. I looked up, my tear-filled gaze meeting the iciest blue eyes I had ever seen, eyes that held no pity, only a dark, unreadable intensity. "He was a fool," a low, resonant voice stated, not as a comfort, but as a fact. "Your name." It wasn't a question, it was a demand. Wait, before the next revelation unfolds, if this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To ensure you don't miss unexpected claims, broken bonds, or awakenings under the moon, subscribe and stay close. Now, back to the scene. "Ilara," I breathed, the name feeling like a relic from a life that had ended moments ago. The man's grip on my hand was firm, grounding. He was dressed in a suit so exquisitely tailored it seemed molded to his powerful frame, a stark contrast to the festive attire of the wedding guests who were now murmuring, their whispers like the rustling of dry leaves. He exuded an aura of absolute command, an apex predator in a room full of startled prey. He ignored them all, his focus solely on me. "Get up, Ilara." He pulled gently, and my legs, numb and useless, somehow obeyed. He led me down the aisle, away from the altar of my humiliation, his stride confident and unhurried. The whispers followed us, growing louder, a symphony of scandal and speculation. Who is that? What is he doing? I didn't know, and in that moment, I didn't care. All I knew was the solid warmth of his hand and the strange sense of sanctuary in his shadow. He didn't stop until we were outside, the harsh afternoon sun making me squint. A sleek black car, the kind I'd only ever seen in movies, purred at the curb, a chauffeur holding the door open. "My name is Damian Blackwood," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through me. "Today was your ending. It can also be your beginning. The choice is yours." He gestured toward the open car door, an invitation to a future I couldn't possibly imagine, offered by a man whose eyes held the cold, beautiful danger of a frozen sea. The interior of the car was a world away from the crumbling church and my shattered dreams. It smelled of rich leather and something else, a clean, masculine scent that was uniquely Damian. As the door clicked shut, the sounds of the murmuring crowd were silenced, leaving us in an insulated, luxurious cocoon. I stared at my hands, still clutching a single wilting white rose from my ruined bouquet. My reflection in the polished window was a ghost in a wedding dress, her face pale and stained with tears. "Where are you taking me?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He didn't answer immediately, his gaze fixed on the passing city streets. He seemed carved from stone, his profile sharp and unyielding. When he finally turned to me, his expression was unreadable. somewhere you can't be found by the jackals who left you to bleed. The venom in his tone was startling, a stark contrast to his controlled demeanor. Jackals. It was a strange word to use, but it resonated with the predatory glint I'd seen in Marcus's eyes when he thought I wasn't looking. Marcus. His family. I trailed off, the pain still too raw to articulate. They are of no consequence, Damien stated flatly. The finality in his voice was absolute, as if he could erase people from existence with a mere declaration. We drove for what felt like an eternity, leaving the familiar city behind for winding country roads flanked by ancient, towering trees. The gates that finally appeared before us were immense, wrought iron monstrosities that swung open silently, as if by magic. They revealed a long, private road that led to an estate so grand it stole my breath away. It wasn't a house, it was a fortress, a modern castle of glass and dark stone that seemed to rise from the very earth itself. "This is your home now," Damien said as the car glided to a halt before the imposing entrance. A home. I had grown up in a cramped apartment with peeling paint and rattling pipes. My life with Marcus was supposed to be an escape, a small starter home in a quiet suburb. This was another dimension. A stern-looking woman in a severe gray dress greeted us at the door. "Mr. Blackwood, everything is prepared." Her eyes flickered over me, my wedding dress, and my tear-streaked face with a flicker of something I couldn't decipher before her expression became a neutral mask. "This is Ilara," Damien said. "She will be staying with us. See to her needs." The woman, whose name I learned was Mrs. Thorne, nodded curtly. "Of course, sir. This way, miss." I hesitated, looking back at Damien. He was already striding away down a long hallway, his back straight and uncompromising. He hadn't offered a single word of comfort, no soft reassurances. He had simply plucked me from my disaster and deposited me in this strange new reality. Mrs. Thorne led me up a sweeping staircase to a suite of rooms that was larger than my entire childhood apartment. A massive bed with a mountain of pillows, a sitting area with a fireplace, and a bathroom that looked like it belonged in a five-star spa. A simple, elegant dress was laid out on the bed, along with a set of toiletries. "A bath has been drawn for you," Mrs. Thorne said, her tone professional and distant. "Dinner will be served at 8. Mr. Blackwood expects you to join him." With that, she left, closing the door softly behind her, leaving me alone in the opulent silence. I stripped off the wedding dress, the beautiful lie, and let it fall to the floor in a heap of satin and lace. The warm bath soothed my aching muscles, but it couldn't touch the chilling cold deep inside me. I was a prisoner in a gilded cage, a guest of a man who was a complete mystery. Why had he done this? What did a man like Damien Blackwood want with a broken, penniless nobody like me? The question haunted me as I dressed and followed the faint sounds of life to a grand dining room. Damien was already there, standing by the window, a glass of dark liquor in his hand. He had changed into a simple black shirt and trousers that did nothing to diminish his intimidating presence. "Feeling better?" he asked, without turning around. "I don't know what I'm feeling," I admitted honestly. He finally faced me, his blue eyes pinning me in place. "You're feeling the shock of betrayal. It will pass. In its place, you will find anger. Use it." His words were not a suggestion, they were a command. We ate in silence, a formal affair with more forks than I knew what to do with. The food was exquisite, but I could barely taste it. My mind was a whirlwind of unanswered questions. Finally, I couldn't bear the silence any longer. "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "Why did you help me?" Damien set down his fork, his gaze unwavering. "Because I know who Marcus is. I know what his family, the Silvermoons, are." He paused, letting the name hang in the air. And I know that they were not just leaving you at the altar, they were marking you for death. The world tilted on its axis. Death? What are you talking about? They're a family with money, a bit ruthless in business, maybe. My words sounded feeble even to my own ears. Marcus had always been secretive about his family's dealings, attributing their wealth to investments. He had a temper, a possessiveness that I had mistaken for passion. Damien let out a short, humorous laugh. Business, Ilara. You have been living in a fairy tale, and it's time to wake up. He leaned forward, the intensity in his eyes making it hard to breathe. The Silvermoons are a shifter pack, werewolves, and so am I. I stared at him, my mind refusing to process the words. Werewolves? Shifters? It was the stuff of fantasy novels, not real life. I must have looked as incredulous as I felt, because his expression softened almost imperceptibly. I know it's a lot to take in, but it's the truth. Our world exists in the shadows of yours. Marcus was their alpha son. He was supposed to bond with you, a human, to create a tie that would have given his pack access to certain resources they believe your bloodline possesses. My bloodline? I shook my head, a hysterical laugh bubbling in my throat. My father was a baker and my mother was a librarian. We have nothing. We are nothing. That's where you're wrong, Damien said softly. You're not nothing. You just don't know what you are yet. The Silvermoons plan to use you and then discard you. Your public humiliation was only the first step. They couldn't risk a cast-off human bride knowing their secrets. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine, colder than the grief that had consumed me. The looks on the faces of Marcus's parents at our rehearsal dinner, the way they had looked through me, their smiles never quite reaching their eyes. The sudden, inexplicable chill I had felt whenever his father, Alistair, was near. It all started to slot into a terrifying new context. So, you're a shifter too? I asked, my voice a whisper. I am, he confirmed. Alpha of the Blackwood Pack. We are rivals of the Silvermoons. I was there today because I had received intel about their plan. I didn't intend to intervene personally, but then I saw you. His gaze drifted over my face, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something other than cold control in his eyes, something that looked almost like recognition. I couldn't let them have you. The dilemma he had presented me with at the church doors suddenly became terrifyingly clear. This wasn't a choice between a life of shame and a life of luxury. It was a choice between life and death. Trusting this stranger, this alpha of a rival pack, was my only option. But what did he want from me in return? No one, especially not a ruthless billionaire alpha, did anything for free. What happens now? I asked, my heart pounding against my ribs. Now, Damien said, rising from his chair and walking around the table to stand before me. You stay here. You learn. You get strong. And you decide what you want your revenge to look like. He held out his hand again, just as he had in the church. This time, I knew what I was walking into. Not just a new life, but a new world, filled with dangers I was only just beginning to understand. I placed my trembling hand in his, the warmth of his skin a stark contrast to the cold fear that gripped me. His fingers closed around mine, a silent promise of protection, and perhaps of something more. The days that followed were a blur of disorientation and reluctant adaptation. The Blackwood estate, which I learned was called Shadowcroft, was a world unto itself. It was staffed by people who moved with a quiet efficiency and a subtle, predatory grace that marked them as members of Damien's pack. They were polite but distant, their eyes holding a constant, unnerving watchfulness. I was a curiosity, an anomaly in their structured world, the human bride rescued by their alpha. Mrs. Thorne became my reluctant guide, instructing me on the routines of the house with a clipped, no-nonsense tone. She never spoke of the supernatural, but there was an understanding in her gaze, a knowledge of the world Damien had revealed to me. My life became a strange paradox. I was surrounded by unimaginable luxury, a closet filled with designer clothes that appeared as if by magic, meals crafted by a personal chef, gardens so beautiful they seemed to defy nature. Yet I was a prisoner. Damien had been clear, for my own safety, I was not to leave the grounds. The sprawling estate was my entire world. Damien himself was a ghost. He would disappear for days at a time, consumed by the business of his vast empire and the responsibilities of his pack. When he was at Shadowcroft, his presence was an almost physical force. We shared tense, silent dinners where I felt his eyes on me, studying, analyzing. He pushed me to eat to regain the strength I'd lost. He had books delivered to my room, not romances or light fiction, but histories, biographies, texts on strategy and power. It was a curriculum, I realized, designed to toughen my mind. One evening, he found me in the colossal library, curled up in a leather armchair. "You read a lot," he observed, his voice startling me from the pages. "It's quiet," I replied simply, "quieter than my own thoughts." He walked over to the fireplace, his movements fluid and silent. "What do your thoughts say?" The question was direct, personal, more personal than anything he'd asked before. I hesitated, then decided on the truth. They ask why I was so blind, why I didn't see what Marcus was. "You saw what he wanted you to see," Damien said, his back still to me. "You loved him. Love is a potent form of blindness." "Did you ever—" I started, then bit my lip, unsure if I was crossing a line. He turned, one eyebrow raised in question. "Have you ever been in love?" The air crackled with a sudden tension, a muscle feathered in his jaw. Love is a luxury alphas cannot afford. It is a weakness our enemies can exploit. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, but his eyes told a different story. For a fleeting second, I saw a flicker of old pain, a deep-seated loneliness that mirrored my own. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by his usual guarded mask. But I had seen it. The powerful, ruthless Damien Blackwood had a crack in his armor. The push and pull between us became a silent, daily dance. He would be cold, distant, the formidable alpha, and then he would do something unexpectedly kind. He'd have the chef prepare a dessert I'd once mentioned liking, or leave a rare first-edition book on my nightstand. He was testing me, I realized, pushing my boundaries, trying to see if I would break. But the girl who had cried at the altar was slowly being replaced by someone else, someone harder, more resilient. The anger Damien had spoken of had arrived, a slow-burning fire in my gut. He was right. I was furious. Furious at Marcus for his deception, at his family for their cruelty, and at myself for my naivete. One night, the simmering tension between us finally broke. A storm was raging outside, mirroring the tempest in my soul. I couldn't sleep. I found myself wandering the darkened halls of the manor, eventually drawn to a room I'd never entered, Damien's office. The door was slightly ajar. I peered inside. He was there, standing in front of a floor-to-ceiling window, staring out at the storm-lashed grounds. He was shirtless, his back to me, and the moonlight streaming through the window illuminated a tapestry of scars that crisscrossed his skin. They were old wounds, thick and silvery, speaking of battles fought and won at a great cost. The sight was both terrifying and beautiful. He spoke without turning. "You shouldn't be in here." "I couldn't sleep," I whispered, my voice thick with a sudden, unfamiliar emotion. It wasn't just fear or gratitude I felt for this man anymore. It was something more complex, something dangerously close to attraction. He turned slowly, his blue eyes electric in the dim light. "The storm bothers you?" "No," I said, taking a tentative step into the room. "The quiet does. The waiting." "Waiting for what?" he asked, his voice a low growl. "For something to happen, for you to tell me what's going on, what you're planning, for you to tell me what you want from me." My voice rose, fueled by weeks of frustration and uncertainty. "I am not a doll you can just pick up and place in a pretty house, Damien." He crossed the room in 2 long strides, his powerful presence overwhelming. He stopped directly in front of me, forcing me to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. We were so close, I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "I want you to be safe," he said, his voice dropping to an intense whisper. "That is all I have ever wanted since the moment I saw you." "Why?" I demanded, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Why do you care so much about a stranger?" His eyes darkened, swirling with an emotion I couldn't name. His hand came up, his fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw. His touch was like a brand, searing my skin. "Because you're not a stranger, Alara," he rasped. "I've known you my entire life." Before I could process his cryptic words, the doors to the office burst open. A man I recognized as Liam, Damien's second-in-command, stood there, his face grim. "Alpha," he said, his voice urgent. "We have a problem. It's Marcus. He's on the property." Damien's entire demeanor shifted. The hint of vulnerability vanished, replaced by the cold fury of a predator whose territory had been invaded. His hand dropped from my face, and he moved to stand in front of me, a human shield. "He came alone?" Damien's voice was dangerously calm. "Yes," Liam confirmed. "He's at the gate. He's demanding to see her." Damien's gaze met mine over his shoulder. "Stay here. Lock the door." He turned to leave, but I grabbed his arm. "No, I want to see him." Damien's eyes narrowed. "That's not a good idea." "I'm not the same woman he left at the altar, Damien," I said, my voice steady, surprising even myself. "He doesn't get to hide. He owes me an explanation, face to face." For a long moment, he studied me, a silent battle of wills passing between us. Then, to my shock, he gave a curt nod. "Fine," he said, "but I'm not leaving your side." The air at the front gate was thick with the scent of rain and tension. Marcus stood just outside the wrought iron bars, his clothes soaked, his usually perfect hair plastered to his forehead. He looked pathetic, a stark contrast to the powerful, confident man I had once thought I loved. The sight of him didn't spark the grief I expected. It ignited the cold, hard anger that had been simmering within me. Damien stood beside me, a silent, menacing presence. His pack members were positioned discreetly in the shadows, their presence a low hum of controlled power. "Alara!" Marcus cried out when he saw me, his voice filled with a desperate, theatrical anguish. "Thank God you're safe. I've been so worried. This animal, he kidnapped you." He pointed a trembling finger at Damien. I almost laughed. "He didn't kidnap me, Marcus. He saved me." "Saved you?" Marcus scoffed, his desperation tinged with disbelief. "From what? A case of cold feet?" "I can explain, Alara. My father, there were business complications. I was held up. I was coming for you, I swear it." The lies were so blatant, so insulting. It was staggering. "Held up?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Is that what you call leaving a woman at the altar in front of everyone she knows? Is that what you call planning to have her discarded like trash? The color drained from Marcus's face. He shot a panicked look at Damien, then back at me. What has he been telling you? He's a Blackwood. They're monsters, liars. They're our sworn enemies. The only monster I see here is you, I said, the words like ice. The only liar is the man who swore to love and protect me while planning to use me for my bloodline and then throw me away. Marcus was sputtering now, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. You don't understand the politics, the power plays. I understand that you're a coward and a snake, I cut him off. Now tell me why you're really here. His eyes darted around nervously. Finally, defeated, his shoulders slumped. My father sent me. He wants you back. He said to tell you it was all a misunderstanding, a test. A test? The absurdity of it was breathtaking. And if I had failed this test? Marcus wouldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the ground. Tell him his test is over, I said, my voice ringing with finality. Tell him I have a new protector now. A low growl rumbled in Damien's chest, a primal sound of possession that made the hairs on my arm stand up. Marcus flinched, his shifter senses clearly recognizing the threat. He took a step back from the gate. You're making a mistake, Ilara, he pleaded, his voice thin and reedy. You don't know what you're getting into. Blackwood isn't what he seems. He's not just some benevolent savior. Ask him what he was doing at our wedding. Ask him why he was there in the first place. With that parting shot, he turned and scrambled back to his car, disappearing into the night like the rat he was. His words hung in the air between me and Damien, heavy and poisonous. I turned to look at him, the same question burning in my eyes. His expression was a mask of stone, but I could see the conflict raging beneath the surface. He had known. He had known Marcus would abandon me. He had been there, waiting. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I hadn't just been saved. I had been acquired. Marcus is right, isn't he? I whispered, the rain starting to fall again, mingling with the fresh tears on my cheeks. You knew this was going to happen. You were there to watch me fall. Damien's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. The silence was his confession. The fragile trust that had been growing between us shattered into a million pieces. The sanctuary he had offered felt like a cage once more. I had escaped one user, only to be claimed by another. I stumbled back, away from him, the warmth of his presence now feeling like a scorching fire. You lied to me. I never lied, he said, his voice low and strained. I just didn't tell you the whole truth. It's the same thing, I cried, the heartbreak fresh and agonizing, a cruel echo of the pain I'd felt at the altar. You watched them break me, just so you could pick up the pieces that suited you. I turned and ran, ignoring his calls behind me. I fled back into the cold, opulent fortress, but it offered no comfort. It was a prison built on secrets and manipulation. I ran until I reached my suite, slamming and locking the door, collapsing onto the floor in a heap of renewed sorrow. The man who had saved me had also orchestrated my salvation for his own purposes. I was a pawn in a game I didn't understand, and I was more alone than ever. I spent the next 2 days in my suite, refusing to see anyone. Mrs. Thorne left trays of food outside my door, which I mostly ignored. The anger and betrayal churned within me, a toxic cocktail of emotions. I had been a fool twice over, first for Marcus, now for Damien. How could I have let myself feel anything for him? How could I have mistaken his calculated possessiveness for genuine care? On the third day, a profound sense of clarity pierced through my grief. I would not be a victim. I would not be a pawn. I had spent my whole life being quiet, unassuming, and easily overlooked. That life was over. If this new world had monsters, I would learn to be one too. I opened the door. Mrs. Thorne was just approaching with another tray. She looked at me, her expression uncharacteristically hesitant. "I'm done hiding," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Where can I find Damien?" She directed me to a part of the estate I hadn't seen before, a state-of-the-art training facility. The sounds of exertion and impact grew louder as I approached. I found him in a large, matted room, sparring with Liam. Both were shirtless, their bodies slick with sweat, moving with a speed and ferocity that was terrifyingly inhuman. Damien was a whirlwind of controlled violence, his movements precise and deadly. He dispatched Liam with a move that sent him flying across the mat, then turned, sensing my presence. His chest was heaving, his blue eyes blazing with exertion and something else, surprise. "What do you want, Ilara?" he asked, his tone wary. "I want you to teach me," I said, leaving no room for argument. "Teach you what? How to arrange flowers?" The sarcasm was a shield, but I didn't flinch. "Teach me how to fight. Teach me what I am. You said my bloodline was important. You said I didn't know what I was. It's time I find out. No more secrets, no more half-truths." A slow smile spread across Liam's face as he picked himself up. Damien, however, looked furious. "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous." "What's more dangerous?" I shot back. "Letting me remain weak and ignorant, a prize to be fought over by you and the Silvermoons? I am not a possession, Damien. I will not be your protected liability. I will be an asset, or I will be gone." The ultimatum hung in the air. I held his gaze, channeling every ounce of my newfound resolve. I would not back down. This was my declaration of independence. For a long, tense moment, he just stared at me. I could see the internal war in his eyes, the alpha's instinct to protect clashing with the undeniable logic of my demand. Finally, with a deep, frustrated sigh, he relented. "Fine," he bit out. "Training starts tomorrow, at dawn. Don't expect me to go easy on you." It was a victory, but it felt like the beginning of a war. The training was brutal. Damien was a relentless, unforgiving teacher. He pushed me past my physical and emotional limits. He taught me hand-to-hand combat, strategy, and how to use my senses in ways I never had before. I learned to hear the frantic beat of a rabbit's heart from 50 yards away, to smell the approach of a storm long before the clouds gathered. Something was awakening inside me, a dormant power, a latent part of my heritage. It started as a hum beneath my skin, a strange connection to the natural world around me. One afternoon, during a particularly grueling session, Damien had me cornered. I was exhausted, bruised, and about to admit defeat. In a moment of sheer desperation, I threw my hands up, and the potted tree in the corner of the training room suddenly burst into a riot of blossoms, its branches twisting and growing at an unnatural speed. We both froze, staring at the impossible floral explosion. "What was that?" I whispered, looking at my own hands in shock. Damien's eyes were wide with a stunned, almost reverent awe. He walked over to the flowering tree, touching a petal as if it might be a mirage. "I suspected," he breathed. "Your lineage. There were legends. Whispers of a human family with fey blood. Blood that could soothe the beast in a shifter, that could command the life force of the earth itself. It was said to be lost for generations." He turned to me, and the cold mask of the alpha was gone. In its place was a look of raw, unadulterated wonder. "You're not just a human, Ilara. You're something more, something incredibly rare and powerful." The revelation should have been empowering, but it felt like a brand, marking me as an even greater prize. "Is that why?" I asked, my voice flat. "Is that what you wanted all along? Not me, but my power?" The wonder in his eyes was replaced by a familiar, shuttered look. He was retreating again, building his walls back up. "It's why I was watching you," he admitted, his voice tight. "Alistair Silvermoon discovered the legend and tracked it to your family. He arranged your marriage to Marcus to steal that power for his own pack, to control it, to breed it. I couldn't let that happen. My duty as alpha of the Blackwood pack is to protect our people from any threat. An unstable pack like the Silvermoons, wielding a power like yours, they would have destroyed everything." His explanation was logical, tactical. It was the reasoning of an alpha, not a man. It did nothing to soothe the ache in my heart. He had seen me as a strategic asset to be secured. "So what now?" I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. "Now that your asset is showing returns?" The hurt was plain in my voice, and for the first time he flinched as if I had physically struck him. "Ilara, it started that way," he said, his voice dropping, taking a step towards me. "I won't lie to you again, but it's not that way anymore." "Isn't it?" I challenged, taking a step back. "You still haven't told me everything. You said you've known me your entire life. What did you mean by that?" He stopped, a deep sigh racking his powerful frame. He looked older, wearier than I had ever seen him. "There is a prophecy, one that has bound our families for centuries. The Blackwood Alpha is destined to find his mate in a woman of your bloodline, a woman who would unite the Shifter and the Fae and bring an unprecedented era of peace and strength. My father searched for her his whole life. He never found her." I stared at him, my mind reeling. A prophecy, a mate. It was too much. "So you saw me and you thought, ding ding ding, jackpot, prophecy fulfilled, power secured?" The bitter words tasted like ash in my mouth. "No!" he thundered, his control finally snapping. The air in the room crackled with his power. "I saw you, and the prophecy was the last thing on my mind. I saw a woman with more strength in her tears than Marcus Silvermoon has in his entire body. I saw a soul that called to mine, prophecy or not. I wanted you, Ilara. Not your power, not your bloodline, you." The raw emotion in his voice was undeniable. The confession hung between us, beautiful and terrifying. But the years of betrayal had left me scarred. How could I trust his words? How could I know this wasn't just another, more masterful manipulation? "I don't believe you," I whispered, the words breaking my own heart as I said them. I saw the impact on his face. It was as if I had ripped something vital from his chest. The hurt in his eyes was so profound, so absolute, it was a physical wound. Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone amidst the impossible flowers, the chasm between us wider and deeper than ever. The fracture was complete. I threw myself into my training with a desperate, single-minded focus. It was the only thing that kept the pain at bay. My power grew with startling speed. I could make plants grow, wither them with a thought, and even sense the life force in the people around me. Liam, Damien's second-in-command, often trained with me. He was more open than Damien, his manner easy and friendly. He treated me not as a fragile human or a magical prize, but as a warrior in the making. "The Alpha's in a black mood," he commented one afternoon as we practiced defensive forms. "Even more than usual." "I'm sure he'll manage," I said coolly, not missing a beat in our drill. Liam caught my arm, his expression serious. "Look, Ilara, I know he's difficult. He's been alpha since he was 19. He watched his father get torn apart by Silvermoon rogues. He's never known a moment's peace. He doesn't know how to be anything but a commander. And I'm supposed to be his next strategic acquisition? I countered bitterly. That's not what you are to him, Liam insisted. I've known him my whole life. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. It terrifies him. His words were a small crack in the wall of my resolve, but I couldn't afford to let him in. Trust was a currency I no longer possessed. I decided I couldn't stay at Shadowcroft. It wasn't my home. It was Damien's cage, no matter how gilded. I was stronger now, more aware. I had to see if I could stand on my own. I packed a small bag one night, taking only the simple clothes I'd arrived in and some of the cash that had been left in my room. I penned a short note for Damien. Thank you for your protection, but a bird can't learn to fly from inside a cage. I have to go. I used my nascent powers to create a distraction, causing a sudden, tangled overgrowth of vines along a distant part of the perimeter wall. While the pack's attention was diverted, I slipped out through a little-used service gate. For the first time in months, I was free, and I was utterly terrified. I made my way to a small, anonymous town a few hundred miles away. I got a job as a waitress in a local diner, rented a tiny room above a bakery, and tried to build a life. It was a hard, lonely existence. I missed the comfort of Shadowcroft more than I wanted to admit. I missed the quiet intelligence in Liam's eyes. Most of all, a deep, traitorous part of me missed Damien. I missed the intensity of his gaze, the unexpected moments of warmth, the feeling of absolute safety I'd only ever felt in his presence. I practiced my powers in secret in a small clearing in the woods outside of town. I was getting stronger, more confident, but my newfound freedom was short-lived. One evening, as I was walking home from the diner, a familiar, dreaded scent hit me. Silver moon wolves. 2 of them stepped out of the alley in front of me, their eyes glowing with a faint, predatory light. Marcus was with them. He looked different, harder, colder. "Hello, Ilara," he said with a smirk. "Did you really think you could hide from us?" I backed away slowly, my heart pounding. "What do you want, Marcus?" "What my father has always wanted. You, and the power you carry." He lunged. My training with Damien took over. I dodged, sidestepped, and used the momentum of his attack to throw him off balance. The other 2 were on me in an instant. I was strong, but I wasn't a trained shifter. I was outmatched. I cried out, focusing my energy, and the pavement beneath their feet cracked, weeds and vines erupting to tangle their legs. It bought me a few seconds, but it wasn't enough. One of them grabbed me, his claws digging into my arm. A sharp, searing pain shot through me. It was then that I heard it, a sound that shook the very foundations of the world. A roar of pure, unadulterated rage. A roar I recognized. Damien landed on the street like a thunderbolt from a clear sky. He wasn't in his human form. He was the wolf. A massive, jet-black beast of shadow and fury, his blue eyes burning with an almost supernatural fire. He was larger than any shifter I had ever seen, a true alpha in his primal form. The Silver Moon wolves who had seemed so terrifying moments before were dwarfed by his presence. They whimpered, their aggression turning to raw fear. Damien didn't hesitate. He was on them in a flash, a whirlwind of black fur and snapping jaws. It wasn't a fight, it was an execution. He moved with a brutal efficiency that was both magnificent and horrifying. He dispatched the 2 wolves quickly, then turned his blazing eyes on Marcus, who was scrambling backward on the ground, his face a mask of terror. Damien stalked toward him, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Damien, no!" I cried out, my voice hoarse. I didn't want Marcus's death on my conscience, no matter what he had done. At the sound of my voice, the great wolf paused. He looked from Marcus to me, his burning eyes filled with a primal conflict. He was the alpha, and his kill had been challenged. But then, slowly, miraculously, the rage in his eyes softened, replaced by a desperate concern. He took a step toward me, then another, whining low in his throat as he saw the blood dripping from the claw marks on my arm. In that moment, I understood. Liam had been right. This wasn't about power or prophecy. The look in the wolf's eyes was pure, unadulterated love. It was a love so fierce it had brought the beast to heel. "It's okay," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I'm okay." He nudged me gently with his massive head, a gesture of profound tenderness. Behind us, Marcus seized his opportunity. With a cry of fear, he scrambled to his feet and fled into the darkness. I didn't care. All that mattered was the magnificent, terrifying creature in front of me. All that mattered was Damien. He had found me. He had saved me. And he had shown me the truth of his heart, not with words, but with the unshakable loyalty of his wolf. The last of my walls crumbled, washed away by a wave of emotion so powerful it left me breathless. I wrapped my arms around his thick, furry neck, burying my face in his fur. "You came for me," I sobbed. A low rumble of contentment vibrated through his chest. He had come for me, and I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, that I would never run from him again. The drive back to Shadowcroft was silent, but it was a comfortable silence, filled with unspoken understanding. Damien, back in his human form but still wrapped in a blanket in the passenger seat to ward off the chill of the transformation, kept glancing at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and regret. When we arrived, Liam and a team of pack medics were waiting. They whisked me inside, fussing over the claw marks on my arm, which were already starting to heal with a faint golden light, a quirk of my fey-blooded heritage. Damien never left my side. He stood in the doorway of the infirmary, watching the medics work with a hawk-like intensity. When they were done, he dismissed them with a curt nod and walked over to the bed where I was sitting. He sat on the edge, his large frame making the medical cot seem small. He reached out and gently took my uninjured hand, his thumb stroking the back of it. "I am sorry, Alara," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "For everything. For my secrets, for my pride, for letting you feel so alone that you thought you had to run." "I'm sorry too," I whispered, "for not trusting you, for not seeing—" "You had every right not to trust me," he interrupted. "I went about this all wrong. I saw you as a strategic objective that became a personal one. I didn't know how to handle it. I don't know how to handle this." He gestured between us, the unspoken emotion that had been arcing between us for months. The prophecy, the mate bond, it's a pull, a connection that shifters feel in their bones. It's supposed to be simple, but with you, it's more. It's not just my wolf that wants you. It's me, the man, and he is terrified of hurting you more than he already has. His confession was raw and vulnerable, a glimpse into the heart of the man beneath the alpha. I squeezed his hand. "You found me. I would have torn the world apart to find you," he said, his voice dropping to a low, intense rumble. "When you were gone, Shadowcroft was just a house. The pack felt my distraction, my rage. Without you, the alpha is incomplete. I am incomplete." The depth of feeling in his eyes was staggering. This was the truth I had been so desperate to hear. It wasn't about power or destiny. It was about love. A faded love, perhaps, but a real one, forged in fire and betrayal, and now, finally, in truth. I leaned forward and did something I had wanted to do for a very long time. I pressed my lips against his. The kiss was hesitant at first, a question. Then, as he responded, It deepened, pouring all of our pent-up frustration, fear, and longing into a single searing connection. It was a kiss of forgiveness, of acceptance, of a new beginning. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless. He rested his forehead against mine, his eyes closed. "Be my Luna, Elara," he whispered, the formal title a stark contrast to the intimacy of the moment. Not because of a prophecy, not to unite our worlds, but because you are the other half of my soul. "Yes," I breathed, the word a simple, profound truth. "Yes, Damien." A true smile transformed his face, chasing away the shadows and revealing the handsome, unguarded man beneath. It was a sight more beautiful than any sunrise. Our peace was not to last. A few days later, Liam burst into the library where Damien and I were poring over ancient texts about my Fey lineage. "It's Alistair Silvermoon," he said, his face grim. "He's made his move. He's not just after Elara anymore. He's challenging you for the territory, for all of it. He's rallied several smaller, disgruntled packs to his side. They're marching on our northern border." Damien was on his feet in an instant, the calm, happy man replaced by the formidable Alpha. "He's using this challenge as a pretense," Damien snarled. "His real goal is to sow enough chaos to get to Elara." He turned to me, his eyes filled with a fierce, protective light. "I have to go. You will stay here, in the safe room. You will be protected." "No," I said, standing to face him. "I'm not hiding. I'm not the weakness in your defenses, Damien. I am your secret weapon. Alistair thinks he's hunting a frightened human. Let's show him who he's really dealing with." Damien's instinct was to argue, to lock me away where I'd be safe. I could see it in the hard set of his jaw. But I held his gaze, and I let a flicker of my power show, causing the dormant rosebush outside the library window to burst into full, vibrant bloom in the middle of autumn. He looked from the roses to my determined face. He saw not a liability, but a partner, an equal, his Luna. A slow, predatory smile spread across his lips. "Then let's show him," he said, his voice a low growl of anticipation. "Let's show them all what happens when they threaten the Blackwood Alpha and his queen." We met them on a wide, open plain at the edge of our territory. The air was cold and sharp with the promise of battle. Alistair's forces were a motley collection of shifters, their eyes glowing with greed and aggression. They outnumbered us 2-1, but the Blackwood Pack stood firm, a disciplined, unified force of formidable warriors, their loyalty to their alpha absolute. Alistair Silvermoon stood at the head of his army, his son Marcus cowering just behind him. Alistair was a large, imposing man with eyes like chips of flint. When he saw me standing beside Damien, not behind him, his lip curled in a sneer. "Blackwood," he boomed, his voice carrying across the field. "Hiding behind a woman? I knew you were weak. Hand her over, and I may let the rest of your pathetic pack live." "The only one who is weak here, Alistair, is the man who needs to steal power because he has none of his own," Damien retorted, his voice calm and carrying, but laced with deadly intent. "This is your last chance." "Never," Alistair roared, and with a guttural cry, he shifted. His wolf form was large and grizzled, but its power felt forced, unstable. He charged, and his army followed suit. The battle cry of the Blackwood Pack answered, a sound of pure, unified loyalty, and the two forces clashed in a maelstrom of fur and claws. Damien met Alistair head-on, the two alphas locked in a brutal, primal struggle for dominance. I stood my ground, protected by a circle of Damien's elite guard. But I was not idle. I reached out with my power, my mind connecting with the very land we stood on. I focused on the ground beneath the charging enemy forces. With a cry that was part word, part raw energy, I unleashed my power. The earth itself seemed to groan. Thick, thorny vines erupted from the soil, twisting and tangling around the legs of Alistair's warriors, tripping them, holding them fast. The ground became a treacherous, living trap. The enemy's charge faltered, their momentum broken. The Blackwood warriors pressed their advantage, fighting with renewed ferocity. I saw Marcus trying to stay at the edges of the fight, his eyes wide with terror. Our gazes met across the chaos, and in his eyes I saw the pathetic ruin of the man I once thought I loved. There was no hatred in my heart for him anymore, only a profound and weary pity. My focus was on the main fight. Damien and Alistair were still locked in combat. Alistair was strong, but Damien was smarter, faster, fueled by a righteous fury. He was fighting for his pack, for his home, for me. He finally gained the upper hand, pinning Alistair to the ground, his jaws closing around the older wolf's throat. Victory was his. But as Damien prepared for the final killing bite, a movement from the side caught my eye. One of Alistair's lieutenants, a huge, scar-faced wolf, had broken through our lines and was charging Damien from his blind spot. "Damien!" I screamed. He wouldn't be able to turn in time. There was no choice. I ran, pushing past my guards, putting myself between the charging wolf and Damien's vulnerable back. I threw my hands up, not in defense, but in offering. I focused all my power, all my life force, all my love for the man, for the wolf behind me, and I unleashed it. It wasn't a wave of aggression like the vines. It was a wave of pure, calming, fey energy, an aura of absolute peace, a power designed to soothe the savage beast. It washed over the charging wolf, and the effect was instantaneous. The beast's snarl turned into a whimper, its charge faltered, its legs trembling. It collapsed onto the grass, its murderous rage completely extinguished, replaced by a confused docility. The entire battlefield fell silent. Everyone, friend and foe alike, stared at the impossible sight. Damien released Alistair, who scrambled away, his eyes wide with disbelief and fear. The battle was over. The remaining enemy wolves, their alpha defeated and their morale shattered by a power they couldn't comprehend, began to retreat. Damien shifted back to his human form, his body covered in blood and dirt, but his eyes only on me. He rushed to my side, his hands framing my face. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice thick with fear and awe. "I'm fine," I breathed, a little dizzy from the expenditure of energy. He pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. "You saved me," he whispered into my hair. I leaned back, looking into his incredible blue eyes. "You saved me first," I said. "I guess we're even." He lowered his head and kissed me, right there in the middle of the blood-soaked battlefield. A kiss of victory, of partnership, and of a love that had been tested and proven unbreakable. The Blackwood pack let out a triumphant howl, a salute not just to their alpha, but to their new Luna, the woman who had turned the tide of the battle, not with claws, but with a power all her own. In the aftermath of the battle, everything changed. Alistair Silvermoon's defeat was absolute. The packs that had allied with him scattered, and his own pack, broken and leaderless with Marcus having fled, was absorbed into the Blackwood territory. Damien was a fair and just victor, offering the defeated warriors a choice: swear allegiance to the Blackwood pack and abide by its laws, or leave the territory in peace. Most chose to stay. The power I had displayed on the battlefield became a legend. I was no longer the fragile human rescued from a wedding. I was the Luna who had calmed a raging wolf with a touch, the queen who had commanded the earth to fight for her people. The respect from the pack was no longer hesitant, it was deep and unwavering. Our life at Shadowcroft found a new rhythm. Damien and I were inseparable, true partners in every sense of the word. We ran the pack together, his strength and strategic mind complemented by my intuition and calming influence. The prophecy had come true, but not in the way anyone had expected. It wasn't about a destined mating that would magically fix everything. It was about two souls, one shifter, one fey-blooded, finding each other through chaos and betrayal, and choosing to build a future together based on trust, respect, and a love that was stronger than any ancient prediction. One evening, months later, we were standing on the balcony of our suite, the same one where Damien's office was, looking out over the moonlit grounds. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Damien's arms were wrapped around me from behind, his chin resting on my head. The scars on his back, which I now knew the story of, were a testament to the life he had lived, the burdens he had carried alone for so long. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked softly, my hand covering his over my stomach. "That day at the church?" He was silent for a moment, his arms tightening around me. "I regret your pain," he said, his voice a low rumble against my back. "I regret every tear you shed, but I can't regret the path that led me to you. It was a cruel beginning, but our forever is worth any price." I turned in his arms to face him, my hands coming up to cup his jaw. The moonlight softened the hard edges of his face, making his blue eyes seem to glow with a soft inner light. All the fear, the betrayal, the heartbreak, it had all led me here, to this man, to this life. I was no longer the girl left crying at the altar. I was a queen, a warrior, and the mate of the most powerful alpha in the land. But more than that, I was loved, wholly and completely. "I love you, Damien Blackwood," I whispered. "And I love you, Ilara Blackwood," he replied, his voice thick with an emotion he no longer hid from me. He leaned down and kissed me, a soft, tender kiss filled with the promise of 1,000 more moonlit nights, a future built not on prophecy, but on a choice. The choice to take a stranger's hand and step out of the ruins of one life and into the new.